Good morning. Welcome back to Morning at NTV. My name is Malaki Vilaodera. Now, October is Cancer Month. And so on this month, we actually create awareness and raise awareness with regards to cancer. And so when we were on ground, we realized that, you know what, there's breast cancer, fine. But many think that breast cancer is only for women and that it doesn't get to men. But statistics actually show that every year we have 2,000 new cases of breast cancer that are reported. And out of this 2,000, 1% is breast cancer in men. So breast cancer in men is there. So to break that down for us and just to demystify these myths that are around is Dr. Arthur, Mr. Arthur Sesanga, who is a doctor, and so he'll help us break that down. Good morning, doctor.
Morning. Good morning, viewers.
Good morning. We were on ground and we were here laughing, and you know, most of them were saying that, are you sure there's no breast cancer in men? Break it down for us.
Yeah. It's quite a big challenge because in most instances men think that breast cancer will not affect them, but it's worldwide known that breast cancer does affect men, and on average about 1%, like you've rightfully said. It's about 1% of the cancers that the breast cancer will be in men. It looks small, but it has quite a big impact. For example, if your dad or your grandfather had breast cancer, it puts you as a female at a higher risk. You enter into a very high risk for getting breast cancer in as much as it was in your male first degree relative.
Right.
So it puts you as a lady at a bigger danger. But also the fact that men do not recognize that it's easier to miss the cancer in men. So most men are likely to report late, and as such it makes the management of breast cancer much more difficult, because cancer as per se is supposed to be caught early enough. If you catch it late, and because of the thought that maybe men will not get cancer, so when someone feels something abnormal they ignore it, thinking no, it can't be breast cancer. But that should be brought immediately to the attention of healthcare workers so that that is dealt with in good time.
Okay, when it comes to early diagnosis, the country and even the health sector has been keen on educating ladies on how to self-examine themselves. So how can men go about self-examining themselves just for early diagnosis? What are some of these telltale signs? Okay,
very interesting. Actually, current findings is that even for ladies, it's not about discouraging ladies to self-examine. Still, we want where possible, if someone is comfortable, to go ahead with that. But the more important thing is to get used to the anatomy, to get used to your breast, what it looks like. For the men, it will be like the chest, because practically the chest. Just be used to what the normal has been from, let's say, the teenage period and as you grow up. So the moment you notice anything that's changing, please seek medical attention so that that's picked early. So there's been a bit of controversy on whether the self-breast examination is yielding good outcomes, and it's not to discourage that, but it's more important to get used, because you might examine and feel everything is okay, but it's more important to look, for example, look at the skin on your chest. So learn to look and see yourself properly. So you look at the skin. Some of the changes that happen are just simply on the skin. So if you only rely on the examination and are looking, for example, for a lump, you might miss the cancer earlier. So just examine. Even for the men, we should be used to looking at ourselves in the mirror. I know it's mainly thought that's only the ladies who will look at themselves in the mirror, but even for the men, let's learn to look in the mirror. Make sure you know what your chest looks like. So when you see something changing, either the texture of your skin is changing, something unusual, please ask a doctor to clarify whether that could be a danger sign. And if we pick some of these early enough, then it's good that we deter cancer eating up the system.
Right. So you look at the skin, you check for lumps. Yes. What other thing can we check for?
Okay, of course, if there's any nipple discharge, that's a danger sign. If there's any blood coming out of there, that's also something that's unusual. If there's pain per se, that's also something to be cautious about. But if you notice anything unusual, you notice this has not been a part of me from the outset. That's also something we need to look at and examine to see whether this is likely going to be a cancer or something unusual.
Right.
Yeah.
And the conversation has been over and above us self-examining ourselves. There's also the need of going to clinics, for the clinics to do the examinations for you. So is it the same case with men, and how often should men go for these checkups in the clinics?
A bit of, again, I'll start with the, and first, in as much as we're talking about men, I'll put it in context, starting with the women.
Okay.
Because normally we want the women to start at about 20 years, and every 3 years, at least let a breast examination be done by a healthcare professional. But again, in the interval between those 3 years, as a lady, keep looking and make sure if there are any changes. You alert the healthcare worker, even if it's not 3 years. So do not sit back and say, after all, I was examined 3 years back, so I'm
okay.
very okay, so I ignore everything. Now, after 40 years, it can be a little more frequent. So at 40 years, ladies might be checked every year. And the other investigations that we do to screen out for cancer, breast cancer, okay, including the mammogram, or sometimes we use the scan depending on the density of the breast tissue. But for the men, it's important still that, of course, in as much as we say it's 1% looks little, but the easy thing with the men is that it's easier to even look and see the changes, because we don't have any much
breast tissue.
Yes, breast tissue. So even that can be easier for the men to look out and see any changes. If you see, and you can easily, just a simple touch on the chest, you feel whether you have a lump or not. And if you're not sure, please, because sometimes there are what we call fibrocystic masses that grow in the breast or enlarge, and they're not cancers as such. But it's important that if you feel anything abnormal, that is detected. So even more important for people who've had relatives, close relatives, if your mother or an auntie, someone close to you has had cancer, then you will preferably start screening earlier. There are more stringent measures for you than the other population.
Yeah.
For the men, you might say it's not a very well-defined thing, but you can say from 20 years, you still have potential, because if you're contributing that 1%, so even at 20 years, it will fall in the same line that it's preferable to have a check as such.
Okay.
With, as you do your routine, for example, wellness checks. You can ask the doctor to just take a look at that.
And how often is this for ladies? Is every 3 years?
Every 3
for
years.
Men is every 3 years as well?
You can do it every 3 years. It's not really well defined for the men, again, because the fact that it's less in men in terms of the 1%, so more efforts have been put in findings in the ladies, so a lot of things might come out eventually. But for the moment, we can run with the one we do for the ladies, so maybe 3 years, but then fine-tune it depending. Remember, not everyone is at the same risk. So when you go and see your doctor, okay, and let's say wellness check, then we can define how frequently or how often, or whether you need to be worried after we've taken a full history of the risk that someone might have.
Okay. What caught my eye is that there are different types of breast cancer in both men and women. Break it down for us.
Okay, technically the breast is made of different parts, okay? There are the lobes and the lobules, the smaller tiny parts, and then you have the glands that produce the milk, and you have the ducts that take the milk up to the nipple. So in all those different places, you might have cancer developing. You can have cancer developing at the tip of the nipple, which technically we call the Paget's disease, but you can also have cancer developing in the duct, and that can be ductal carcinoma. You can have the cancer developing in the lobules, okay, that's lobular carcinoma. So there are different kinds in that form. There are also others. Some are just inflammatory cancers of the breast. So those are the different. Now, the way they occur in the lady is the way they can occur in the man. Of course, depending on the tissue, because for us we have less tissue, so there are some which are more prominent in the ladies, which will not occur in the man, because the female mammary gland was created a little unique, because you're going to breastfeed and the like. So, but technically, all those, the cancer can occur in any of those different things, and that's how the different cancers come about.
And the different cancers, are they treated differently?
In a way, yes, but not exactly, because the general thing is that normally what defines how the cancer is going to be treated is whether it has remained in situ, it's in a localized area, has not spread, or whether it has become invasive and has started spreading into surrounding tissue, or it has metastasized. So it has gone into wider areas like the lymph nodes. Like breast cancer is common, goes in the bones, can go in the liver, goes into the lymph nodes under the armpits or on the collarbone. So those are areas where the spread can occur. Sometimes it even spreads to the brain. So the treatment is not defined by the type of whether it's a ductal cancer or a lobular carcinoma. No, it's mainly whether it has spread from the duct to the surrounding tissue or whether it has spread even further on. That's what defines how the treatment will be targeted.
Wow. Wow, and you're telling me that there are 3 options of treatment. There's chemotherapy, radiotherapy, and hormone therapy as well.
Yes, you're forgetting even the surgery.
And the surgery, people don't want to think of
yes.
surgery, especially us women. Mastectomy
yes.
is something that
yes.
just affects even your self-esteem as a woman.
Yes.
But in men, which of the 3 treatment options works best?
Of course, there is, first of all, we have to know that very importantly, surgery is part of, apart from being a treatment modality, it's also used in terms of diagnosis, confirming one, how far, whether it's spread and different things. So surgery acts both as a diagnosis, but also as a treatment. Yes, because sometimes the tissue is removed and sent over to define certain receptors. Okay, there are receptors that can be on the tissues. Okay, and those are like the estrogen, progesterone, and others which are called neoreceptors. So when those are detected by the pathologist, those are physicians who are specialized in looking at cells under the microscope and define the details, or even running more specialized tests that involve a lot of molecular biology. So they define whether those receptors are available on those tissues. Now that will define how the treatment will occur. So it doesn't mean that everyone, for example, will undergo hormonal therapy as such, but if they have those particular receptors, then we know they will benefit from particular treatment that target those receptors. So those that's the type that will benefit from that. Others will, yes, as we said, surgery, and depending on how far it has spread, it will define how far the surgeon will go to remove the tissue from the affected area. So sometimes it's just a lump, what we call lumpectomy. A piece is removed from there, but still many times the surgeon would want to see how far the cancer spreads. So sometimes they do what is called a sentinel node. So a liquid is injected in there and it spreads into the surrounding lymph nodes. So as far as it spreads, then the lymph nodes are picked out, and those are sort of worked on depending on the findings of histology again, the abnormalities that come.
But surgery can't stand alone in terms of treatment.
No, it's never, technically it never will stand alone, because even with the best surgery in most instances, if you just think the cancer is what we call in place, seated in only that area, has not affected any other thing in situ, when you remove that lump, there is a chance, for example, of a single cell to have migrated, and it could have deposited anywhere else, and it could become disastrous for you later. So you can have a recurrence of a cancer. So because of that, when surgery is done, always, as a matter of fact, you'll have an additional treatment. So sometimes the treatment comes after, okay? So it's called adjuvant chemotherapy. Adjuvant is just that the surgery has been done, we think the cancer has been contained, but not to take any chances. The chemotherapy comes as an after to hit out on any cells that could have migrated. So you can't, unfortunately, have the cancer in most cases, rather the surgery stand on itself as a treatment modality for cure of cancer. You have to have an addition. And
at what point do patients get radiotherapy and chemotherapy at the same time? Because I know there are patients who get both treatments at the same time.
Yes. Now again, most instances, like after the surgery, And again, depending on the discussion you've had with a particular doctor working on you, and how your health is and everything else, it will determine. Sometimes the radiation therapy will be done immediately, especially for those cancers that seem to be localized in an area. It's easier because the radiation targets that particular area and sort of kills off any other cells that would have grown. But there are certain cancers which are a little tough, like it's spread. And unfortunately, most times people come in late when the cancer spread to other parts like the liver, the brain. And in that instance, you can't radiate the liver, you're not going to radiate the brain.
Yeah.
And because of that, then chemotherapy becomes more of the modality. But if it's confined in one area, it's easier to use radiation therapy. But if it's spread to other parts, then it complicates matters.
Let's demystify these myths, and it's some of the views that Andrew Chamagero got on ground when he was talking to the men, and most of them were saying that chemotherapy actually kills you faster than curing you, and so most of them opt for herbal remedies.
Yes.
Do herbal remedies work?
No, unfortunately, herbal remedies do not have any role to play in the management of cancer. Actually, for most cases, many people die off because sometimes, for one reason or the other, they've not managed to get the radiation therapy or the chemotherapy. Maybe it's a cost thing, maybe it's availability, they're so far away. I don't know how easy it is for the people who are in Kasenyi to easily access, for example, Mulago. You know, in societies, like when I was working in the rural areas, you find that going for treatment is a whole village thing. They've got to collect things together, the money, and pull together things to send you. So some of those things deter people to get to chemotherapy in time, or they don't keep up the appointments that were given as they should be, or other factors that might deter them getting the full chemotherapy. So as such, they pull out. But also, the other thing is that because chemotherapy hits at your body system, it knocks out most of the things. So you become weaker, your hair goes off, sometimes the nails are lost, you really lose your taste. It's quite a terrible experience, tell the truth. So because of that, sometimes people feel I'm getting worse on chemotherapy. So they give up earlier, so they don't go back for the subsequent appointments. And as such, they either die off as such. So the issue will be, so the other people around will judge the chemotherapy was the one that's caused this. Yet there are other factors in there. But herbal treatment per se is not any avenue for treatment of cancer of any form. Okay,
and that brings us to the factor of affording treatment for cancer. How much is one session of chemotherapy?
Now, definitely if you went to the Cancer Institute, it's supposed to be, technically all the treatments are free. But if they had any reason, then that will be explained. But technically that should be accessed as a free drug, and then you continue. So you just give an appointments and you go and get the sessions at Uganda Cancer Institute. Cancer treatment is very expensive. As an individual, you might not be able, on the average, most people will not afford, maybe even over 90% of the population will not afford to manage cancer on their own. And so the government vies for that, comes in to make sure that cancer drugs are available at the Cancer Institute so that people can get a free service. Same thing with radiation therapy is supposed to be given free. So that is supposed to help. A few people might afford, but that is still very expensive in terms of treatment. It's in millions of shillings for any one person to, and for the average Ugandan, that's a deterrent to
radiotherapy is given for free?
Yes, that's also given for free.
Okay.
Yes, you might make it sometimes there might be a little contribution, but it's still not the action in terms of if it was costed to pay for everything, but it's technically supposed to be given free.
But by and large, treatment for cancer is available in the country?
Yes, it is available in the country. Some particular treatments, like the hormonal treatments, might not necessarily be all available in the country. And those are high-tech, because even the diagnosis is a bit of a high-end cost to it, to find out the particular receptors that one has, and then the drugs themselves are another expensive thing. So the option doesn't mean that the people who get the chemo are less advantage. No, but if you got hormonal therapy, it might make it easier in terms of not necessarily that you get so many side effects, because the chemo is less of an encumbrance in terms of the side effects. But still, for where we do not have the hormonal, the chemotherapy and the radiation therapy, and of course your surgery that you had, is good enough. More importantly, is for people to seek health care early enough, so when we catch early, the outcomes are better.
Okay, with treatment on chemotherapy, because how it's also managed and how you're taken care of as a patient plays a big role on how you're going to heal, the healing process as well. So what would you tell patients who are undergoing chemotherapy in terms of the tips they can, you know, embrace, so they can, you know, fast track their healing process and make the side effects, you know, more bearable, so to speak?
Of course, as we said, the side effects are quite deterrent for most people, and it discourages one. But we usually, when someone is going through chemotherapy, they need a good counseling session. So they will need to have several sessions, because it's easy for you to give up. It's easy for you to feel that everything has come to an end. It's easy for you to think now death has really come, because it hits you hard. Now, some of the things that are done, apart from the counseling to encourage, we need, the people who are being treated for cancer need a lot of family support. If in churches, for example, you hear someone is being treated for cancer, please visit them, encourage them, pray for them, be around them, bring them things, clean up for them, and that encouragement alone gives them the urge to fight on. Okay, so that's very important. But again, be very careful and cautious, because the people who are undergoing chemotherapy are open to anything. So if anyone came with a cough, if they had any simple infections that the rest of us can handle, simple flu and the like, it hits hard this patient who's on treatment for chemotherapy, because all the systems have been hit. The treatment hits every part of your body, so it also affects the cells that are supposed to fight for you.
The immunity.
And as so your immunity goes low, and then anything can attack you. So please do not go if you're sick, if you have any cough, flu, don't visit these people. It's supposed to be isolated, and it makes them feel terrible, because some cancer survivors have given their own experiences of how they had to keep away from their children's schools, from functions, even a wedding. We wouldn't advise that they attend that, because they can interact with anyone who has an infection, and it will be very terrible for them, because their natural immunity is low. So as such, they keep away, and then eat a balanced diet. Normally, I like the experience from one cancer survivor. She said that she used to hear a balanced diet in school, and she thought it was a joke. So she went to her doctor and asked, and the doctor simply said, all you need is a balanced diet. Do not necessarily go for the supplements when you're on chemotherapy. The supplements do not do, in any case, some of the supplements might affect the way the chemotherapy is working and deter its effectiveness.
Okay,
so
how?
Never take supplements have different components in there, and some of those components could interact with a drug and stop it from working well. Okay. So it might not kill off the cancer cells as the intention is. So do not do any. The simple thing is keep a balanced diet. Okay, make sure you're eating some of your proteins, a bit of carbohydrates, a little fat here, not much, and preferably the good fat like what we get in avocado. So those are good, or fish. That's a very good source of your fat. And then, of course, protein, and preferably plant proteins are much better. But basically, any protein, if you can't easily get a plant protein, you need that balanced diet, because now you're using the food to help you rebuild the system to fight off.
How about patients who now, out of the symptoms of chemotherapy, end up, you know, just removing everything they eat? They can't hold anything down. They keep on, you know, vomiting. How do you handle such patients?
Okay, in such instances, then the patient will be helped. So, for example, most of the side effects are manageable. We have drugs that can help stop the vomiting, so that at least someone can put down something. If the worst came to the worst, of course, unfortunately, it gets a bit expensive. They are sort of like food nutrients that can be given intravenously, but that's again very expensive. So the most instances, we try as much as possible put the people on, because we know the side effects from the drug. So some of these medications are even started a little earlier to deter some of these side effects that would occur, like the vomiting. So someone can keep down, and then would advise them to eat small meals at a time that they can contain then after. So they will eat more frequent, like every hour or so. So they eat something, so they keep it down. And in that way, we try and manage them.
So small portions frequently.
Yes, small portions more frequently.
Okay, let's get down to the issue of, and it's cancer conversations are very tough because we know many are struggling with this. And when we get down to the issue of still managing breast cancer and early diagnosis,
Yes.
most of the people that we are able to interface with throughout our period with interacting with people who are cancer survivors or cancer patients, they say, for me, it's not like I didn't self-examine, it's not like I didn't go for clinic checkups, but the issue was misdiagnosis. I kept on going, they told me, no, it's okay, the lump is okay, it's not cancerous, and then after 5-10 years, then you're told that same lump is now cancerous. So when it comes to misdiagnosis, what do? Do we now go for second, third, fourth, views from different doctors?
As a matter of fact, if you have, for example, a lump and you feel uncomfortable, and still a doctor is telling you it's not, it doesn't hurt to have a second opinion.
Okay.
And as doctors, we usually, it's okay to refer a person. Like if I saw a patient with a lump I'm uncomfortable with, I'm 50-50, not sure, I would want the surgeon to get in there and we get a second opinion. If they feel they're uncomfortable, third opinion. Many times, unfortunately, that is not sought for, a second opinion. Sometimes we think I'll finish everything on my own, and that's a bit of sometimes the danger. But it's okay to discuss the issues with the patient. Feel free that this initially is not good, and then have someone else look at it. But as something of principle is, for any mass, the definitive diagnosis, unlike the mammograms we do, unlike the ultrasound scans that are done, is by biopsy. So a tissue preferably should be taken off, and either if it's fluid filled, we do what is called a fine needle aspiration. So take off a few cells and run them for histology and check. There's also what is called cone biopsy. Part of the bigger chunk of the tissue is taken out again. Of course, as we said, in lumpectomy, the whole lump is removed and a bit of the surrounding cells, and again those are taken for histology. Now those are some of the very definitive way of diagnosing. Otherwise, if you've just had this a mammogram, which is an X-ray of the breast, it might not define everything. The lump might look like it's benign, but that doesn't define. Normally, aside from that, then we should be able to go and pick a piece of that tissue we think is not dangerous, is not cancerous, and subject it to histological examination. So for me, the urge would be for anyone who has a lump, your first thought should be that this should be biopsied. Most times it's the patient sometimes who fear to go for the biopsy. They feel uncomfortable, they feel, no, I don't want, it's painful. And it's not painful because you're given a local anesthesia and then that is done. So the first thing that someone should know is, as soon as you have the lump, your first thought should be, it should be biopsied. Preferably should be taken out. Whether it's a simple mass, it should be removed, because when you get a lot of the tissue, that's when you can dissect it and look at the particular cells. That's when you unlikely miss the diagnosis for cancer.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Before we come to a close, any last remarks to cancer patients especially? Yes,
I know cancer looks like a dead end, but for all people, one, we need to detect early. So we need to do regular screening for breast cancer. Know that also men need that. If you don't know, ask your doctor when you next visit. You're doing a wellness check like the ones we have in the international medical centers, like at IDC, where we have wellness clinic running. Please ask your doctor to explain to you and to show you how you should do this. So do your regular checks, okay, so we detect early and can pick it and treat. Now for those who've been caught with the cancer, no, it's not the end of life. I know that's the tough one. Wherever declare that this is cancer, someone thinks this is a death sentence.
Yeah.
No, it's just that managed properly, this can be handled, and you can be free of cancer eventually. So please do not shun away from getting to the health centers and screening for this particular. And if you're told this is necessary, please do not refuse to go ahead and have the tests done, because it's for the good of managing your condition.
Thank you so much, Doctor, for coming in studios.
Welcome.
So tell your men to go for these checkups. It's not just for us women. Very important conversation to have with the men in your life. That has been it for Solutions segment. Morning at NTV still continues. Up next is Take Note with Flavia Tumusime. Keep it here.